Welcome to Spirit's Journey, coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. Your hosts are Patrick and Kathryn Andries.
Join us each week as we explore a wide range of metaphysical topics such as dreams, astrology, intuitive readings, and life purpose. You'll receive practical guidance so that you can live your most awesome life.
Learn more about what we do at intuitiveschool.com and connect with us on Facebook at Spirit's Journey Radio. Hi, everybody. We are coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio, your protection from deception, simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. You can also find us on Hari Heart Radio, tune in and talk stream live. We are here in the Heartland, holding the energy for spiritual truth and awareness. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Kathryn. Welcome, everyone. So, as you know, one of the goals of our radio show is to bring you solutions, spiritually based, for better living. And today we have a guest who's actually going to help us not only focus on the spiritual, but also the physical. I have an old friend from many years ago, Carla Gibson, Doctor of Chiropractic, based in Scottsdale, Arizona. And she's committing to helping people live an ideal life of health, vitality, and ease. Her training goes beyond the traditional mechanical chiropractic approaches and focuses on the mind-body connection to optimize function and healing. Her approach is especially suited for finding answers for the management of chronic fatigue, autoimmune disorders, and other chronic diseases. She's been in practice for over 12 years and has worked with people from all over the country, and most enjoys helping her patients experience a renewed joy in life. Welcome, Carla.
Hi, Carla.
Hi, hello. So good to be here.
Well, yeah, I'm so excited for the message that you have to share because my grandfather was actually a chiropractor. So I grew up getting treatments from my grandfather. And throughout my whole life, I've used chiropractic. I know how amazing it is. And I met Carla actually through the Leche League, and she was an amazing mentor and helped me get through the beginning stages of being a new mom and all that cool stuff. And here we are today talking about you being a chiropractor. So your approach is a little different, like you said, than the typical, let's fix the back with the mechanical, adjustment. So can you tell us a little bit about how your approach involves all mind, body, spirit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, traditional chiropractic is a miracle for a lot of people, Kathryn. As you know, most people, the first time they get a chiropractic adjustment, it's like the first time they've really ever taken care of their frame or their skeleton or, just like their physical body. We don't get a lot of body work, as a regular practice in our culture. In some cultures, it's part of their regular routine. But in the American culture, it's not common really to take care of your frame like that. So, 100 years ago when chiropractic was invented and became very popular and people started taking care of themselves that way, there was a lot, people were doing a lot of physical labor, like working in fields and working in factories and, still maybe like walking everywhere and, doing different things. And a lot of the chiropractic miracles that you hear about are people that got into accidents and then, over time found themselves with some disease process or something never quite healed from an accident. And then, coming along, doing traditional chiropractic adjustment, putting the bone back into place that had been knocked out of place by some force or trauma, was a miracle for that person, because there was nobody else that did that. But nowadays, most of the stress that people come under and most of the disease or the dis-ease that we have comes not only from physical traumas, car accidents or falling off things or playing sports or something, but it also comes from the sensory overload, the worry, the fears that come from being in a world where there's so much information. There's so much information. We know what's going on all over the world, 24 hours a day. And, even just 20 or 30 years ago, that wasn't the case. Maybe you knew what was going on in your family or your neighborhood or even your country. But, now you can worry about the whole world if you want to, because you can find out what's going on. We're a fast-paced society. We never turn off. We always have our phones. So a lot of the stress comes from that. And when our bodies are stressed, we adapt. We adapt physically. We do tighten muscles. We bones move out of place from muscles tightening. We also have that fight or flight response. And nowadays it's actually fight, flight, or freeze, which means that we might be stopped and paralyzed, like can't do anything because we're overwhelmed. So the chiropractic approach that I use takes all of that into consideration, not just looking at the spine. That's still very important, still miraculous for people to take care of their body that way. But it also looks at, why did the bones of the spine go out of place? Or why did the body react in such a way that has that spine be misaligned and those nerves interfered with? And then the third piece is just to look at our nutrition. We're nutritionally deficient, we're stressed, so we don't digest as well. Our food supply is not as rich in nutrients as it used to be. So we really find that we're nutrient deficient, and that puts stress on our body as well. Actual physical stress. Muscles can't relax when they need to if the nutrients aren't there, or your body, literally thinks it's going to starve because it doesn't have the right nutrient profile. So you're living like in a stress state all the time. So with my approach, we just look at all three of those areas and use various techniques and nutrition programs to support the patient so that they don't have to deal with that stress, and they just experience, our tagline is health, vitality, and wellness with ease. We just try to bring ease to the whole body from all kinds of different approaches and all different ways of doing that.
Wow. And one interesting thing I wanted to ask your perspective on this that I had heard is that if you have an accident and you don't have an emotional attachment to it or whatever, like let's say you were doing something you love, like dancing, you fell and hurt yourself, versus let's say you were in a car accident, which was more traumatic. I've heard that the emotion that you have when the accident occurs can actually determine like the extent to the misalignment and how quickly you heal. Have you had experience with that?
Mm-hmm. Excuse me. Yeah, it's, it can be the emotion, just the sheer upset of you're doing something you love, like dancing, and you fall and hurt yourself, or, you're in the car and going along and everything's great, and all of a sudden, bam, somebody hits you. That can be like a high intensity emotion, or it can be emotion that's tied into something that you love like that. But there's also like, it might not have anything to do with what you're doing. You may just be at an emotional or stressful time in your life, and then something happens. And whatever that emotion is, we estimate it could even be up to 6 months before an accident occurs, that some trauma that you had going on in your life could actually get patterned in during that accident, during that physical trauma. And then maybe that's why you don't heal, is because you're still reacting to that, even though you think they're not connected at all. You could be driving down the street and get into a car accident, but you're going through a divorce. And you get out of the car accident and you get a new car, the divorce goes through, and then a year later you're wondering why does my back still hurt, or why do I still have this upset? And it's because the trauma of the divorce is actually patterned into your nervous system, even though it might be over and complete for you. So yeah, it's really interesting that so many things affect us that we're not even aware that they're affecting us.
So what kinds of processes do you have to help people through those emotional issues that you're describing?
So I started off using a technique called bioenergetic synchronization technique. It was developed by Dr. Mortar, and it was actually the first technique I learned. It's the technique that had me get excited about this field and go into chiropractic. And then when I went to chiropractic college, I learned there are like a lot of different techniques out there that deal with the nervous system and the mental and emotional component and the stress component. So I use a variety of techniques: neuro-emotional technique, bioenergetic synchronization technique. Recently, I started working with another emotional release technique that's sourced from about 3 different techniques, some of which are chiropractic, some are shamanic in nature. So it's really cool to be able to, have a patient really dig into all aspects of a stress or a trauma, something that they remember happening, and make sure that there's nothing left to get in the way of their body healing the way it's designed to.
So that was one thing that I learned actually many years ago, because I do the energy work too. And so bioenergetic synchronization technique, that was one of the first techniques that I learned in my health coaching practice. And I remember when I was going there, the Dr. Mortar was talking about how he had discovered that some people, he would put their vertebra back in alignment, for example, and then just on the way out to the car, it would slip back out of place. And he was describing, he started looking at the soft tissues and how the muscles would contract and create stress on one side of the spine that would cause the spine to come out of alignment. And so obviously I imagine you've probably seen that in your patients. Can you describe a little bit about how that process works so that people can recognize when that's happening, of how, it's not necessarily, you were talking about accidents that throw the spine out of alignment. I think that seems much more obvious to people, but can you describe for people, like, how do the muscles pull the spine out of alignment through that imbalance of tension?
Yeah, it's really good, Patrick. And it's interesting because you and I, being in this field, we're always thinking about how the body's reacting to things, because we know that. But it's so interesting to me that when I actually talk to people, they've got no clue.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Like today I went and I talked to a group of attorneys, and and I said, "Do you have any questions?" They're like, "My neck hurts," and in my mind, a whole cascade of reasons and causes and what it's impacting. Do you know that if your neck hurts, all the nerves from your neck come out of your neck and go to your heart and your lungs and your thyroid? But people just think it's just their neck that hurts,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if there's specific patterns, but I think that's really what's the issue is that most people they're used to a Western way of thinking about things. Once it hurts, I should go do something about that. Or it hurts. Well, I don't know. It always hurts. So I'll pop a pill, take a Tylenol. That's how I was. And that's how I got into chiropractic, is that, my whole life, I always had kind of chronic pain because I was hit by a car when I was 3. And then, I had a broken leg, and it was the 70s. I reset my leg. I did a little physical therapy. I could walk. And for the medical model, I was fine. The bones broke, it healed. I could walk again. Everything was fine. But in my body, I had tension. I had headaches probably every day when I was in high school. And I just took a Tylenol. That's just what we did. So I had no idea that, that there might be some other cause. I wasn't just suffering from a Tylenol deficiency, that there might be some other reason why my body, stressed and tensed up and, had different things. Now for me, some of that might've been just straight structural misalignment. I was hit by a car and who knows what got jarred, the people that saw that accident said I was thrown up over the car, 50 feet in the air and, dumped on the ground. So who knows what happened, but I think for most people, what I hear a lot in my practice when people come in is, the shoulder tension. They really, especially women, they really get they wear their shoulders as earrings, oh yeah, my shoulders are right up and they're up all the time. And that is just that is a physiological reaction to stress. Because if you actually anybody that's listening right now can and just sit up a little straighter and just relax your shoulders. Just think about consciously relaxing your shoulders and putting them down. Now, if you can do that, then you are in a sympathetic dominant mode, which means your brain on some level was protecting and defending you and trying to get your attention to tell you, hey, something's chasing you, run away. Because if you think about it, when you need to run away or fight, you're going to want to get a lot of air. You want to breathe. You don't necessarily need to breathe deeply to do a strenuous activity like that, but you need a lot of breath to fuel the muscles, give the muscles quick energy and run away. So your rib cage and your shoulders actually lift to expand your rib cage so that you can do that. And then once you run away from the bear, then, you're meant to relax that physiology and then relax and breathe really deeply in your belly and then bring all of the blood and all the nutrients back to your belly for digesting food and nutrients and having your body get back to the job of repairing and healing. So really, I think the most that's the easiest trick in the book is to stop throughout your day. And if you can lower your shoulders, you're stressed and you probably need to do something to address it. And you can start with deep breathing, having a yoga practice, a meditation practice. All those things are fabulous. But, mostly what I hear from stressed people is, I tried meditation, but I really couldn't focus. My mind just goes crazy. Or I tried to do yoga, but, I get on that mat and it's uncomfortable. I can't stretch certain ways, whatever, a million things get in the way. That's when people know they really need to go get some body work of some type to help release the physical stress and tension. And then ideally, if you find somebody like me that is releasing the stress and tension by getting to that mental and emotional cause, it'd be more complete. And then that would allow you to implement those practices, all the things that you hear would be so great for you. So I don't know if that answers your question, Patrick, but that's kind of what came to mind.
Oh, it does. And, I think the irony in what you said there is people say, oh, I can't meditate because I can't focus my mind, or I can't do yoga because I can't stretch certain ways. And in my mind, it's like, well, that's a sure sign that you desperately need that. It's like if you
Right.
can't stretch certain ways, you really need to work on your flexibility, or you really need to work on your focus. So I
Yeah.
think those are signs. And like you said before, this instant gratification, instant result mentality that we have in our society, the people want instant results without having to work for it. And I think we need to realize when things are healthy and natural, and when it's the best for our body, it takes time. It isn't something that's necessarily going to happen instantaneously.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, like with yoga, you gradually develop the flexibility, or with meditation, you gradually develop that calmness of mind. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, that constant discipline and persistence, being willing to put in the work to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And, Carl, I wanted to backtrack when we were talking about, sometimes people have an accident. So from the mind body perspective, what we've learned is that, energy has to express itself. And so many of us bottle it up, right? We repress it, we shove it down, and eventually that energy is going to come out. And so many times it's in the form of an accident. I mean, it's happened to me before. That's when I had a minor car accident. I'd been bottling something up. And so it's basically energy that the person was not allowing out. So do you deal a lot with like this repressed energy and causing problems in people, and how do you release it for them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny. So when I first started doing best, that's kind of how we talked about it, is like energy and, like how things express in your physical body. And then I went to chiropractic college, and I had the delight and pleasure of learning about how we talk about that. There's actually a physical conversation for energy. We kind of talk about it like, oh, we're all energy. We actually are all energy. Like on the physical level, we're a bunch of little electrons put together, So our nervous system, like another way to look at that, like if you're someone who's like, I don't really understand that energy thing, on this physical level, it's kind of like the things that take us away from being present. When you have all that energy bottled up, or you're using so much energy. I know I think Debbie Ford used to talk about, if you took a big beach ball and you try to shove it under the water, how much energy it takes to hold that water under the beach, that beach ball under the water.
Oh, yeah.
Like that, right? Like that feeling. Like that's kind of what it's like for people when they're dealing with, their relationships, their kids, their job, whatever happened to them in the past that they never got over. Like they're trying to hold all of that, and it's like they're trying to hold a beach ball underwater. So that's when you say like, how is that energy? And then all of a sudden you have an accident and all like it explodes, right? It's kind of like, well, you run out of the strength to hold all that together. So something's got to give, and it expresses as an accident or, something. And it's really like, it's like on the neurological level, it only takes a second of taking your presence away and a muscle not firing correctly. And then you're an athlete and you trip and fall, or you're not so much of an athlete. Maybe you're just a weekend warrior, or, that person that's like trying to get back in the gym, and, you're working on doing so many reps, and all of a sudden you have that thought like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm gonna have the money for that bill. And then you miss a beat and you jerk like a shoulder or something, and then all of a sudden that shoulder is damaged. So I think it kind of goes hand in hand. It's like, we're like this, our brain is this supercomputer, and we have a lot of bandwidth, but we keep filling it up and filling it up and filling it up. And then all of a sudden, on my phone, I know my kids always laugh at me because they'll look at my phone. I got 10,000 windows open. You're supposed to close them when you're done. I didn't know. You just, you open another app and you open another, and then pretty soon you wonder why the thing doesn't work, And our brains and our body are kind of like that. We demand so much, from ourselves, and so much. And then, yeah, the moment you're not present, and, that energy, like you said, that energy is going to come out somewhere. The beach ball is going to go flying to the surface, and it could manifest as an accident, as a pulled muscle, as a fight with your spouse, something like that. So I know sometimes that puts it, it's funny, Kathryn, because I know I tend to really, when I talk with patients, sometimes patients come in now and I'm not enough in the energy conversation for them, even though it's kind of where I started. But I just love how there's an opportunity for us to really like get the amazing physical presence that we've decided to inhabit, like our energy being like came into some physical form, like some physical body. And for the most part, we're pissed off about it. For the most part, we're like, why? And I always laugh. And I was like, who threw away the manual? Like, didn't they get a manual with this thing? So, so I'm always kind of cautious because, by the time people get to me, they're looking for they're looking for a smoking gun, or, they're looking for like something to blame. And sometimes that energy conversation is a way to get off the hook, like, oh, well, it's just happening to me because something it's outside of me. It's not outside of you. It's actually all you, so I enjoy having a conversation that brings people back to like a presence, like a physical presence where they can actually be powerful about what they're dealing with and sort out and get all the support for their energy body as well as their physical body, but in a way that doesn't have them just feeling like they're a victim to some mysterious energy or something that they don't have no control over.
Well, yeah. And what I've experienced sometimes, not with everybody, but when you bring up this idea that, well, whatever sickness or whatever you're having, you kind of caused it, and it's like, oh, it's not politically correct to say that. They're going to feel bad. And it's like, oh, come on, when are we going to get to the point where we can just be honest? And like you said, it's not a put down. It's not that the person did something wrong. It's like, wow, the flip side is if you caused it, you also have the power to heal it. Do you ever have people react to you and say, well, I didn't cause my whatever,
Yeah, it's kind of why I took it out of that realm, because that really is how kind of I was trained, it was revolutionary for me. It really was a point of power for me when I first heard this conversation of, well, anything that happens to you is like, it's your fault. Like that was like revolutionary, because I really did always think I was at the effect of like, I don't know, just you get sick, like, when you're a little kid, like, oh, somebody says you're sick and you just think, oh, it's like something that descended upon me. Like I had nothing to do with that, and I don't know, when you're young, when you're a small child, you're developing a nervous system. You really don't have power over a lot of things that happen to you. Things happen to you. And then when you become an adult, you get this enormous opportunity to start to say that whatever happens to you, you have something to do with it. Not even always like it's the truth, but like it's something that gives you power. Like you said, because then you can do something about it. You don't have to wait for, something to go away.
Right. I think that's a natural stage of self-development and self-growth, because I remember in my early days of learning about metaphysics, and when I was learning about this idea that we could create our health with our thoughts, and that was revolutionary to me at the time too. I thought, wow, is that really true? But then as I would experiment, I could see how my thoughts were definitely creating a physiological effect in my body. And I think sometimes people would take that to say, oh yeah, I feel guilty because I'm, now, I'm creating all this terrible stuff for myself. But like you said, the truth is it empowers you, because it's like, wow, if I can control my thoughts and improve my health, that gives me something that's within my grasp, within my control, that goes beyond anything that I've had before. Because before it was just like, oh, well, I'm going to be dependent on these medications or this, this process, or something outside of myself is going to be what heals me. And the truth is, wow, our bodies are so resilient. It's like we can abuse them so much. Look at all the people who are smoking and stuff. Their body is constantly working to cleanse that out, to keep them going, even though they're taking the stuff in. So it's like the body is incredibly resilient. And if we just give it the proper direction, it's amazing what it can actually heal.
Yeah, it really is. You can adapt to anything. That's kind of the bottom line, is you can just adapt and adapt and adapt. Yeah. Until you can't anymore. That's when you usually are gone. That's when you're dead. Right.
Well,
but
and that's
the process. You use so much energy to like, what are you actually having to do to adapt? And is it worth it? For some people, okay, is it worth it for you to have to feel terrible so that you can drink a Diet Coke every day or whatever you think you have to do? For some people, they're like, yep, I love my Diet Coke. That's what I'm going to do. Okay, great. You just have to realize there's going to be a cost,
Yeah. Well, and what you were just talking about, the adaptation, that's kind of a new discussion that I see surfacing now, where we're finding that actually stressing the body in a good way, like, going outside when it's cold and, working in different temperature zones and all this, it kicks the body into a gear where it has to react and it builds itself stronger. Have you been, hearing people talk more about this idea of, that the body can adapt, and we become, kind of like such little babies, I guess, in a way, like, oh, the kids can't play outside, it's too cold, and I remember growing up, we'd be out there for hours building forts in the snow. What do you think about that?
Yeah, there's definitely something to that, and I think it's a reflection of where we're less adaptable. Like, I think our kids are being born with just less resources. Not that they can't adapt and be great, but there's like more to overcome. There's a lot of birth defects. A lot of kids now are born with tongue ties and lip ties and tethered oral tissues that is a failure of the DNA to splice properly. I'm not saying that right. Don't anybody look that up, because I didn't just say that right, like scientifically. But it's a midline defect. It's a midline defect. So the neural tube did not form properly, and then that's how you end up with tongue ties and lip ties. And it's like, now if you actually look at adults, it's kind of been that way for a long time, because now I can see adults that have tongue ties and lip ties, and they never really revised them or noticed them or did anything about them, as long as the baby could feed. That's a lot of times what a lot of babies bottle fed instead of breastfed, is because they actually just couldn't make the right seal on the breast.
All right. Well, Carla, we need to take a break. We're at the bottom of the hour. That went by really fast. So we're going to take a short break. And if you are at your computer during the break, you can go to tfrlive.com and check out our page. TFR is a listener-supported station, so if your contribution helps us continue these great programs. This is Spirit's Journey on Truth Frequency Radio, simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. We will see you on the other side. Welcome back from the break. If you are just joining us, this is Spirit's Journey with Patrick and Kathryn Andries, coming to you on Truth Frequency Radio, simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. We're here today with Carla Gibson.
And Carla is an amazing chiropractor. We're having a discussion on natural health, one of my favorite topics. So, Carla, before the break, we started talking a little about, kids not being born as healthy as they were in the past, and all you got to do is look around. People are saying this is one of the most unhealthiest generations of people. Patrick and I work in the schools. We see it all the time. Asthma, ADD, attention deficit disorder, you name it, digestive problems, and so on. So what's going on with the sickness today?
Yeah, it's so complicated, right? 10 years ago, Kathryn, it was all about, well, it must be the mercury in the vaccines, and there's still a lot of problems with the vaccines, but we got environmental toxins everywhere. Like, who knows at this point, right? Who knows what we're eating? Who knows what we're breathing? Who knows how that's affecting our DNA? Who knows how that's affecting a developing fetus? Like, at this point, it's kind of a mystery, but what does seem to be emerging and clear is that a lot of people can't methylate. They can't actually go through the actual biochemical pathways that are needed to break down nutrients to actually be usable by their cells. So that, right there, it's like, okay, remember I was saying, if you don't have the right nutrients, it's a new emergency for your body. I don't know if I got to say that here. I said it one time today, but it's the biochemical piece, like not having the right nutrients to function and your body having to make it up or having to adapt over it is a stress to your body. And so I just think we're seeing that more and more, kids that are born now, or even a lot of adults that end up with autoimmune conditions and things, we find out it's because they've been deficient in nutrients their whole life because their body was just making do without it because they couldn't actually pull those nutrients apart and utilize them. So I think that's a lot of it. And, there's a lot with this Wim Hof. I know you're talking about the adapting to the cold, and there's all these modalities coming out, like sit in this cold, freezing cold water. We got all these cryotherapy places here, which is great. I don't know if it's just here because it's Arizona.
Oh, right.
We always like it when we can be cold here. And there's something to that. There's something to, my whole practice is built around having people be less stressed. And the reality of it is there's actually nothing wrong with being stressed. It actually is really good for your body to have stress. We're meant to adapt to stress. Again, it's just how hard do you want to work? What kind of experience do you want to have? If you could change something in your diet, if you could get some body work, if you could get your brain to stop reacting to something that happened to you 20 years ago and have all that energy back to live the life you want to live now, like, wouldn't you want to do it? Like, wouldn't you want that? And wouldn't you want it to be easy? So that's kind of the way that goes. A lot of times we make stress the bad guy. It's not really. It's just how, we're designed to handle it. But if you don't have to, why would you want to?
Well, I was thinking about, when we're talking about stress and how it's good for you, that's really the basic idea of working out, isn't it? Is that you actually stress the body beyond your normal operating parameters of the day. So, maybe you go for a 2-mile walk, or you swim, 15 or 20 laps or something like that. And it stresses your muscles and your cardiovascular system beyond what your normal needs are. But that's actually what keeps us healthy, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's that book called Younger Next Year. And that's their whole premise, is that that vigorous exercise is the key to staying younger and younger, because it makes sense. If you force the body to go in and get rid of cells that aren't performing optimally, then you'll make new cells and you'll regenerate. But the key to that is you got to have the nutrients to actually do that rebuilding. And I think that's why we see more and more, kids, like you said, Kathryn, kids used to love to be outside, running around, playing around. And I don't know, like, I just see like kids, partly we hypnotize them with electronics now and all these other things they can sit and do. But the other part, I think, is partly we just don't have the same physical energy that we've had, because, sometimes we're not using our nutrients well. So yeah, you do want to stress your body with those kind of exercise, but you also want to have the nutrients available so that the tissue can be rebuilt, because that's how you rebuild a stronger tissue. And I know a lot of my, my female patients that deal with adrenal fatigue, it just doesn't work. Like, they just can't get the benefit of exercise. In fact, I usually start off telling those patients, like, I'm actually telling you not to exercise. And Dr. Mortar used to say that too. He used to say, you have to move to be healthy. Like, it's actually necessary to move like that to be healthy, but moving won't make you healthy. Like, you actually have to have the health to be able to get those benefits from the exercise. So kind of got to start with, filling the deficiencies first.
Well, it's amazing to me when you were saying that there's this whole group of people that are developing this condition where they can't break down the nutrients out of their foods, because basically what that means is that they are very slowly starving to death. And that's kind of scary when you think about it. And, when you were talking about how sedentary we are, it reminded me of this animated movie that we were watching one time. And it was one of the best lines I remembered in it. I thought was funny, where the animals, it was all about these animals. And so they went into this neighborhood, and some of the animals, the younger ones, had never seen humans before. So this other animal, who is older and kind of wiser, he said, "Oh yeah, these are humans. They're slowly losing their ability to walk."
Oh my gosh.
Because they were all just sitting around watching television and stuff. And they were in their cars driving around.
Oh, that is
gosh.
funny. Well, Carla, when you were talking a little bit about, why is this one of the sickest generations of kids? And one of the theories I've heard is that, yes, we've got the environmental stuff, we've got pesticides on the food, but the difference is, and all those are affecting us. The difference though is that when you eat something, or, you have the opportunity, it goes through the digestive system, it can leave the body, easier than in terms of a vaccine. It's directly injected into the bloodstream. And so what I've heard is that that's the straw that's breaking the kids, is that they've got all these other things, their body's kind of plugging along, but yeah, they've got the exposure to the toxins and the environment and stuff. And then they get that vaccine injected directly into the bloodstream. Of course, the schedule has been increased to include something like 63 vaccines by the age of 18. And that's the trigger.
Yeah, it could be. The only thing that mystifies me, Kathryn, is, I've been hanging out with a population of people that don't vaccinate their kids, and then they still come up with that with stuff. So then I go, well, then what triggered them? So it's kind of a conundrum, because for years we're beating this drum about the vaccines and then, okay, so then we're starting to have a generation of kids that, small, very small piece, small sample, but small sample of kids that actually didn't have that stress. And then they're still dealing with issues. So it's kind of like, and it could just be, I don't know, maybe I got vaccinated and my DNA got a little damaged from those vaccines and then my kids have that DNA. I don't know, but it's just definitely interesting. So, that's where, when you look at it as a spiritual conversation, like what's it all for? Like, why would we, how do we let this happen? Like on the spiritual level, like what are we actually trying to develop or experience or transform by having to deal with all these issues?
That's a great concept. Yeah, Carla's taking it deeper for us here. So bringing in the spiritual component. What are we trying to learn from this? I love that. One of the things, could be getting back. Well, my thought is the more that we develop the mind to an imbalance where we become overly mental, we spend years and years and years studying, we get shut off from the heart, shut off from our natural instincts of what's right for the body, what's not, that we're losing that connection. And so I don't know, I feel like maybe all this is trying to bring us back to the basics, that just the practical things in nature, and what instinctively we know is right for the body and what's not.
Yeah.
And another oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, in some ways, it's kind of like the mirror of what we were talking about before we started, Patrick, about how, I don't know, seems like sports are getting more extreme. It seems like people have to find more and more ways to be like out there and different and stand out. Like, I don't know, maybe on the spiritual level, that's what this is all about. You come into the body and it could be strong, it could do all these things, and okay, now you got to come into a body that can't actually get nutrients from food. Now what? Like, now what do you have to actually develop to be able to deal with that, and to deal on the spiritual level with the whole world and bring peace to a world that's starving, something like that. I don't know, maybe that maybe we're in this extreme sport of life now.
Right. Interesting. Well, one thing I was saying about it is that it kind of reminds me of sustainability in the environment. And, there's companies now that are starting to think about, well, if I make this product, what kind of materials am I going to be using to make this product, and what kind of impact will that have on the environment? And then after this product has reached the end of its life cycle and the person needs to get rid of it, do you recycle it? Does it decompose in the landfill so that it breaks down instead of sitting there for 10,000 years? So there's all these things that there are some people starting to think about the whole life process of the products, which I think is important for manufacturing. But then when you extend that into our food system, and what kind of quality of food am I really taking in? Like with our commercial farming operations, they're just focused on volume. Let's create a volume of food, but they're not really thinking about the nutritional content. They're not thinking about, well, what impact would this have on the people who eat it if we geoengineered a pesticide into the food, and then the people are going to be buying this and eating the pesticide that we genetically created into the product. So all these things, it's like, if they're not going to think about it for us, I believe that as consumers and individuals and spiritual beings, that we need to think about that. It's like, are we really going to invest in cheap food that isn't healthy for us, or are we willing to pay more for it to get healthier food? I mean, that's kind of the way we think about, like, the increase in expense for buying organic food is almost kind of like our healthcare program. Instead of spending tens of thousands of dollars on medicine and doctor's visits and tests and stuff later on, we're just spending that money up front in a preventative way to buy better quality food now.
Yeah, it's a good point. One of the things when you say that, Patrick, about, well, they're looking at this, we always tend to think of it as like some sinister, big, some big company trying to make a lot of money or something like that. I always think of the conspiracy, but the actual, the issue that we have with gluten is actually like a well-intentioned, the gentleman that developed the drought tolerant wheat actually won the Nobel Prize. And that development actually is contributing to the eradication of hunger on the planet. Now, again, we could have a conversation about, okay, so people can eat, but are they actually being fed? Right? You can actually look at that.
Right.
But I don't know if you've heard this, but the World Health Organization has declared that hunger will be eradicated from the planet, like within the next decade, like by 2030, which is a fulfillment of, decades and decades of trying to solve this problem of how do you feed an ever-growing population and make sure that people aren't hungry and suffering and starving. So the gentleman, I don't know if it's a gentleman or a team or whatever, that developed the drought-tolerant gluten won the Nobel Prize because it really did solve a problem for, nations who were struggling with, like, how do we actually grow enough food to feed all the people? And the downside is that gluten has something like 8,000, or that wheat has something like 8,000 times more gluten than normal wheat.
Oh, wow.
And nobody thought to look at, like, oh, will this be a problem?
Yeah.
And so now we've got, a whole industry. We've got people that have to really watch out for gluten. Some people are completely intolerant. Some people just have a sensitivity. Like, there's all these levels of it. And when you actually learn the science of it, Dr. Karazian talks about it. He's a scientist and a doctor who wrote the thyroid book, and he formulates supplements for Apex Energetics. And, he talked about when you actually look at the role of gluten, it's beautiful. You're actually meant to be able to, like, open the gap junctions in your gut and absorb more food in times of, like, famine, or in times when you don't have enough to eat and you're eating like a storage food like that. It's actually biologically appropriate that your body would absorb bigger proteins. The problem is that we're eating gluten every day, all the time, instead of natural foods. And then those gap junctions are open and letting undigested proteins and things that we can't actually tolerate, get into our bloodstream and sensitize us to things. So it's a really fascinating conversation, Patrick, when you kind of talk about it. It's like, yeah, like, who would have thought of that?
Yeah, I mean, it
trying
is.
to solve
And
one problem, and then how do you actually, like, mind-bogglingly get all the biochemistry of it and all the things, and actually, control for that. So it's really interesting.
Well, I think the problem is that they're looking at it at the surface level, like, oh, why aren't these people having enough food to eat? So if you go look at it metaphysically, Stuart Wilde, who was one of my favorite metaphysicians, he talked about this issue of poverty and why certain countries or parts of the world were poor and others were always wealthy. And he said, we've been pouring millions of dollars into a lot of these poverty stricken countries, has not made a difference. And he says, when you get down to it, money is energy, right? And he said, the reason some people are starving or there's not enough food has to do with the fact that emotionally they are pushing it away, that metaphysically, if money's energy, it's self-worth issues. I mean, even in the United States, you'll see somebody with money, you'll see somebody in poverty. Well, what's the difference? We live in this world of abundance. It's not a physical problem. It's a mental, emotional, spiritual one, that we could pour millions and millions and millions into all these crazy foods that we're making to supposedly end hunger. And it's not going to change anything in the long run until the underlying cause, which is this idea of, it could be many things why people would push away money, lack of self-worth, on and on and on.
Interesting. Yeah. Yep. Mind-blowing.
I think it's really good that you brought that up, though, in terms of how some of these things, they're created, they're very well intentioned, but then they can have unintended consequences. I think there's a lot of situations that we're dealing with that originally these things were thought to be great ideas. I mean, look at asbestos. That was like the greatest thing ever when they came out with it. And, oh, it's fire retardant. Let's put it in everything. We'll put it in kids' toys. Oh my gosh, this stuff's great.
Put it in baby powder.
Right.
Now, of course, we know, it comes with all these problems. So I think part of it is just, creating things and then learning from our experience of creators. And that's really spiritually, when we bring this back to the spiritual level, that's, I think, our ultimate lesson is that we are creators. And so that is our duty, so to speak. That's our nature. Our inner nature is to create, but then it's to learn from our creation. So it's learning along the way that creations have consequences. Some of those consequences are, we would consider them good and welcome, and some not so much. So it's just learning to be adaptable, and I think we can bring that back into what we were talking about with health too, just looking at our thoughts perhaps, and experimenting and observing, what is my thinking creating today?
Yeah. And, somebody was just sharing with me, the whole concept of gratitude, it's all over, spread all over social media, be grateful for this, be grateful for that. And sometimes we forget that the whole concept is to actually be grateful for everything, like all of it, like all of it, like, oh my gosh, they sprayed that pesticide and now we have this problem. Like, how do you bring gratitude to that, in a way that empowers you and sets you free? And again, if you don't have that thought where you're always, like you said, Kathryn, I don't know, you're going to try to fight against everything and fix everything and change things. And they can't be fixed or changed probably, at this point. And in the meantime, how you think about it and, being mad about it or upset about it or angry about it actually only impacts you. Doesn't, it might put you into action. It might have you take some action you wouldn't take that might make a difference. But for the most part, there's that cost, that physical cost of having a thought that puts you into fight or flight and uses up your resources when really your fighting isn't really going to do anything about it,
So what do you think it's going to take to get the Western medical system to look beyond the local issue? I mean, it's so amusing to me. I actually took my daughter to see somebody, and she was saying something about her breathing. And so all the doctor could do was look at her lungs. Oh, lungs look fine. Anyway, so I researched on my own, talked to some natural practitioners, and discovered that sometimes it has to do with low iron. The doctor didn't even go there. I mean, it was so funny to me that they are so just elementary in the way that they look at things compared to how a chiropractor does. Do you think it's ever going to change?
I think there's a slow trickle of people who just don't give the medical system the same credibility that they used to. And then, at the other spectrum of it, even I'll, run my kid to urgent care if the fever's high enough or, they've been suffering long enough. And I'm worried that there really could be like some crazy infection, running rampant or something, that really does need emergency medicine. Because, medicine does what it does. It's really good at it. Problem is that, like we say, like if the only tool you have is a hammer, then everything is a nail.
I love that.
Yeah. So, it's a very limited ability they have to do things. And then they try to fit everything into their box, and it just doesn't work. And I think more and more people are becoming dissatisfied with that. I talk to more and more people every day. And again, I'm pretty close to California over here. So there is just a little bit more of a culture, I think, of being a little more open to different alternative modalities and things than maybe in the Midwest or even on the East Coast yet. But I think people are a little disillusioned. They're a little disillusioned with, going to a doctor, getting a prescription and not having it really make a difference. And, maybe coming out with more symptoms than they had because of the medication they were given, and, being told, oh, this is the only way. And so I don't think anything's going to fix or change the medical system, probably not in our lifetime. But I think that there is more access for people who really want to be responsible and take charge of their health and actually prevent illness. If people really got that they could prevent illness, they're not conscripted to something just because their parents had it that way, or just because that's what everybody in their family gets that, or that's just what happens to people when they get old. And people really get that doesn't have to be their future, and that they can actually take charge, make different choices, create new practices, take on new things, ask more questions, talk to a variety of people instead of just like one doctor, that they really can create that health world for themselves, whatever they want that to look like. And then, probably not in our lifetime, but probably in another 100 years when that's where the money is flowing, then you can probably count on the medical field to do, to try to capture that market. And I think it's happening. Here we have the Mayo Clinic, and they have all kinds of, extra modalities and things. And then you've got our Cancer Centers of America, and they're offering supportive modalities for cancer treatments. There's definitely a little tiny move underfoot. There's hospitals here that pay massage therapists and chiropractors to be on staff so they can offer those additional services to their patients. So It'll be a very quiet shift, but it probably, over time, that probably you'll probably see that happening.
We will hope. Oh my, that would be amazing. And so, Carla, one of the fascinating things on your website is the health triangle. And so let people know what your website is, how to reach you, and what is this fascinating health triangle that actually is amazing for things like weight gain, fatigue, chronic illness.
Yeah. Well, I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona. It's www.abundanthealtharizona.com. And when I got into practice, after going through a lot of chronic fatigue and, chronic headaches and things myself, and using a variety of modalities to just disappear those symptoms, not have to deal with those all the time anymore. When I came into practice, I really wanted to work with people who just were complicated. Usually it's a woman who's in her 40s. She spent a lot of time taking care of family, taking care of either kids or her parents, and then has a career on top of it, and she's exhausted. She can't lose weight no matter what diet she tries. She doesn't have enough energy to exercise, and nothing seems to work. So when I got into practice, when I looked at everything I learned, I realized that, if you had a symptom, it came down to it may seem complicated, like there was a lot of things wrong with you, but that it always comes down to a deficiency in 1, 2, or 3 areas. And it's those 3 areas that you see in the triangle. So it's the chemical and biochemical state of things. Are you getting nutrients? Are you being exposed to toxins? And then there's the structural misalignments, which is I'm trained in as a chiropractor to, locate and diagnose and correct vertebral subluxation, which is a structural misalignments of the bones of the spine. And then there's this mental and emotional component, like how are you dealing with stresses that are happening now, stresses from the past, things that may be keeping you in stress and you don't even remember they happened to you. They're in your subconscious. So I just find that when people really focus on addressing those 3 things, and the analysis that I use makes it really simple to see where we can support you in those 3 areas, so that you know exactly what there is to do to support yourself, like exactly where your weaknesses are. But if you go address those 3 things, you can't help but heal. You really give your body what it needs. You'll have everything it needs to heal. And I've just had some miracle cases that I've been able to turn around when nobody else has. And I love that. And it's just been from taking that approach of like, it seems complicated, but it's simple. And we're going to look in these 3 areas, do everything that's indicated, and give you a chance to, transform and have a whole new experience of your physical health.
So we have about a minute left, Carla. What would a typical experience be like? How do people, how would they get started with you, and what would that look like?
Yeah, well, most people come in for an initial exam that's about an hour, and we basically go through every nerve, muscle, and bone in your body and evaluate everything metabolically and biochemically that could be missing for you. And then I usually design a 6-month plan for people to really put in a foundation. But I know this program might be heard by people all over the world, all over the country, all over the world. So I do have packages available to come in, for a weekend or for a week and do some intensive work. And you come in for a series of adjustments, and start a dietary plan and a nutrition plan. And then I have some other cool toys like a beamer mat and a brain tap and IM detox foot baths, to really give you an experience of healing while you're here. So there's a lot of different things, but people can get in touch. I have a package just for your listeners if they want to give me a call and look at what that looks like to come in.
All right. Well, thank you, Carla. We are out of time for today, and thank you for being on our show.
Thank you, Carla. And if I come to Arizona, I know where I'm going.
For sure.
Right.
For
well,
sure.
We love having all of you with us. So just because the show's over doesn't mean we have to part ways. You can stay connected with us on Facebook at Spirits Journey Radio. Be sure to like our page. Also, you can check out what we do at intuitiveschool.com. This has been Spirits Journey on Truth Frequency Radio, simulcast on One Is Talk Radio. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Kathryn. Have a fabulous week, folks. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye for now.